2167 earnings per summary.
Whatever you said, I don't know if you heard.
Payroll system, payroll technology.
No, it's for you, I was saying.
So what am
You
I?
can start right now for your governance if you wish.
It's not me.
No, it's fine, I'm sorry. I was thinking governance.
You were talking to me. Oh.
So who's the number two for more? Okay. Well, he's there. Okay.
Where would that be
I
on
don't know, that's what I'm asking.
our sheet here?
67.
We may have to get Mr. Marks to help us. How much was it?
Chairman, you guys are live now.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to ask.
Hey, we're live.
Okay.
It is. Okay. I'd like to call to order this Thursday, January 17th, 2019 meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee for the City of Plattsburgh. We'll start with a roll call.
Councilor Kelly?
Here.
Councilor Moore? Here. Mayor Reed?
Present.
Councilor Armstrong?
Here.
Councilor Gibbs?
Here.
Councilor Ensel?
Here. At this point in the meeting, we would invite members of the public to come address the council on the agenda items.
You live in the city, Ethan. Do you want to come say anything?
Okay. Next, we have reports from our department representatives and discussions with councilors. We have none of those here at the moment, so Mr. Marks comes in and anybody wants to ask him any questions.
Richard was here, Mike. He just had to go downstairs for a quick second.
Yes, okay. So with that, we'll move on to item number 3, which is to examine the agenda items brought forward from the departments to be approved by committee and recommended to council. 3.1 is a request from the city chamberlain to transfer 11.96% of all budgeted overtime payroll appropriations from all funds in the 2019 budget, requiring a total budget transfer of $144,833 of overtime payroll appropriations to contingency appropriations in all funds, as well as requiring the creation of a contingency appropriations budget line item in each fund without such a budget line, that is, all for all funds except the general fund. And we talked about this a little bit last week and sort of arrived at consensus that it was a good thing to do. Does anyone have any additional discussion or questions or concerns about it?
No.
I'll tell you that I was talking with a friend of mine about this proposal, and he suggested to me, and I wish I could take credit for it because it was such a good idea, but I won't. It was my friend who suggested that if at the end of the year these contingency funds remain in contingency, perhaps we could reward our managers with some sort of recognition for having done a good job on that. And it's not a part of tonight's resolution, but I thought that's an excellent idea. So let's talk about that.
Is that something that we can legally do, though? I guess that would be my question. I don't know if that.
So,
Dean, is that something that
Sorry, I was reading a report. What was the
if they're the contingency funds that we're setting up with the overtime, if there is money left over in those contingency funds, could we use some of those funds to reward department heads or managers that kept the overtime?
in theory, but I believe you'd have to go through a budget amendment process at the time. So once you set the budget's set, and there's provisions in the charter to then subsequently amend it. So once you designate it to a specific fund, if it's not going to be used in that fund,
Okay.
yes, but with the process.
Okay. I didn't know if there were any other.
And then Councilor Armstrong also suggests that perhaps we address the department heads and ask them to come up with plans for how they might reduce overtime in their various departments. And think as long as the council doesn't get in the business of directing the department heads what to do,
Right,
we're okay to ask for plans.
right, because we're primarily concerned with how we can save money.
Okay. But all.
How, Mike, I guess my question too would be, if we see that there are departments that are blowing out their overtime appropriations, we cannot make any sort of requirement upon them to stop. But once again, I think I asked this last week, what authority do we have to control the spending?
Well, I think the budget amendment is an excellent way to, you know, assert our responsibility, our fiscal responsibility.
But I guess I'm just wondering if we can or have any sort of way of putting in some measures, cost and control measures.
But here's the thing, by the time we're looking at it.
It's spent.
It's already spent.
Right.
Yeah, so then how do you proactively
Right.
Address that?
Well, you should be, I mean, you'll be monitoring, Rich sends the monthly report, so you'll see a trend, and you're not gonna spend it the first week of January, you'll have seen it over time as becoming an issue, so hopefully.
So we can
Yeah, I mean, we will
refuse
we
to-
will know each month, at the end of each month, where it stands in comparison to the previous year and to where it stands in comparison to the percentage used against what's budgeted.
You actually see that every week, not every month.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's right here.
we do.
There.
But, so is your suggestion that we would put a cap? If we,
To be honest, I don't have a suggestion, specific
just
suggestion. It's
formulating.
just something that
Yeah.
I would just, again, and I think I addressed it last week, that I think we just need to have some sort of controls on there. I'm not saying, you know, watch every penny and monitor every penny, but I just think that if we start to see some budgets being blown out of the water, that we need
Your
to
only
address
real
it.
control would be doing a budget amendment. Now, once you pass the budget, it's their job to administer it. You can monitor it. You can say you can ask for a report. You can say you have concerns. The only action you can do, the only control really have, is do an amendment to their budget. And that's a pretty powerful tool. There's no real tools in between.
But there's no authority for them to actually follow that budget either, though. I mean, they could continue to spend the overtime.
Well, theoretically, once they use their budget is gone. They can't spend any more in that category. Now, we could very rigidly try to invoke that. It hasn't been done in the past that way.
No, and just because we're changing the budget numbers doesn't mean the payroll system's gonna stop paying.
Right,
people.
that's right.
Right.
Correct.
So the key to it is asking people, what are you spending the overtime on and why?
Right.
And what is the importance of it? Is it constructive or is it unnecessary? Is it necessary? I mean, you gotta sit down and look at the details with them.
Right, and are there any staffing adjustments that could be made that would reduce overtime?
I think you need to find out what is being spent and why first before you decide on
That's
hiring
fine.
people and changing. I mean, this is my opinion.
Sure.
I wanna know why we're spending it. Because all we see is the numbers coming in,
Right.
no details, no nothing. And, you know.
So what supplementary information could we request that would be reflected in their departmental budgets that could inform us if they shared it?
Well, every week you get the numbers on the overtime that's being paid in the by the week.
Right, but
You see it year to date.
what is behind that information that we could gain access to?
Is the detail kept at the department level about who's
Right.
earning the overtime and what they're doing to earn it? What are they working on?
So that's the kind of information we would need to request.
And then decide whether it makes sense, that it should be spent. Is it necessary? Or is some of it just repetitive?
Well,
Is it redundant? Is it just because it's there?
Now, Richard, can I ask you a question? I know that there was some questioning about overtime. I believe it was with the fire department that was
Right.
actually holiday pay rather than, is that reflected in this?
That hasn't been adjusted yet. We're still trying to figure out why they're reporting the hours for holiday as overtime. I don't think they know why.
So this figure here then is not accurately representing the
It
holiday?
could be inflated by holiday, yes.
Okay.
What I'm concerned about is
year-to-date.
the holiday hours are being paid at time and a half instead of straight time.
Okay.
And I don't think that's occurred, but what we have to find out is why it's being reported that way in the in-time system incorrectly.
Okay.
I don't think the fire people know at all. We only can get from them what's reported by the hours, because we don't have their timekeeping system. They possess it, and they just send us a file from it. And the file is just a set of exceptions to a standard weekly salary. The exceptions being overtime, vacation, sick leave, etc., blue time, Kelly time. There's all sorts of different time at the fire department. But if they send it to us that way, we have to process it. We don't have any control over, is it accurate or not? Is it correct or not?
And this is something you and I have been talking about ever since I came. We have to have
Pretty much.
a more, you know, accounting isn't just simply payroll and paying the numbers that you have POs for. It's a system. And if we aren't tied into the system and understand you need to be able to delve into the payroll figures and see how they're calculated, and then be able to express that to the council and a systems approach, because systems have feedbacks. When you exceed things, you understand why, you go and correct them. We need to put that in place. I know that's very important to you. I know there's some hang-ups. We need to figure out ways for all the various entities to do all their cost controls, et cetera, too, but it has to be unified and shared somehow centrally.
There's no timekeeping system for the city where you can see the reason for the payroll distribution.
Right.
We don't have time and attendance records on anybody except for the people in my department. Of course, you know, I have it manually on time cards. The unfortunate part is we had a good electronic system, but we couldn't get the support to finish it. And then IT lost the files on us, and, you know, so we stopped. We weren't getting support from the previous mayor on it at all. But there's no time and attendance records that you can see unless you go to the departments and ask them, show me how you're keeping track of your time.
So, what would be a reasonable point at which you would request this more detailed, or the council would
Every week.
request? Every week?
I mean, we're
Okay.
giving you the numbers every week,
Yeah?
and you're entitled to see what's being spent on every week and start to question why. There's no other way you're gonna control it. You have to know what's being spent on and is it necessary.
we sign payroll every week, so if you really want to drill down, you can see who's getting the overtime.
Well, I
I
think
mean,
there's
we
a
can tell you-
more.
But it won't say
we can give you a
why.
payroll
Efficient
report
way.
and tell you the individuals that are getting paid the overtime.
But
But you
Rich,
still don't know what they're working on and why they're doing it.
Richard's
That's what
list
the
of
department
questions
decides.
should be asked every week.
Yeah.
They're good questions. and they-
Before the people in my department work overtime, they have to ask me for permission, and I say yes or no. And I determine if they really need to or not. I don't know if that happens anywhere else.
So do we need to develop a list of questions that we expect answers to, beginning next week?
Sure.
Okay.
But we have to do some corrections, like Council Renzel says, to the fire department timekeeping, because I think they've been sending us the wrong codes on their fire holiday. I don't know why they've been coding it over. And like I said, I don't think they know. I
Would
think there was-
that be a system error, or?
I think there was something that wasn't finished in the in-time system before we lost the individual to the county. She was in the process of the setup, and I don't know if they had tested it or not. We weren't really in the loop on it. And she's gone now. She works for the county, and I don't know if anybody's looked at that system of theirs and determined that it was accurate. I think we might have errors back in November for Thanksgiving and for Christmas and for New Year's in the row. I don't think they were using it prior to October. So I don't believe that we had the problem with Columbus Day or Veterans Day. But we could. We've got to look at all the holidays and see if they've been quoted right. Unfortunately, we don't have the time with processing the payroll every week and looking at the bi-weekly payrolls to take our time to make sure we can go back through the records and test everything and question everybody. We just are scrambling to get it done. The weekly payroll is killing us still, and we need to resolve that. If we were doing a bi-weekly for all departments, there'd be a lot more time for items. Question?
What's the total cost of the weekly payroll for the 2 departments?
For the 2 that are going weekly,
Yeah.
probably 180,000. No, 120,000.
That's an opportunity cost and stuff like that that your people spend working on it.
Well, I mean, that's what their payroll
Speak up.
cost is, that we generate checks for them every week. That's a police and MLD. We generate them every week. The cost of doing the payroll weekly was estimated at about $19,000 4.5 to 5 years ago, when I was asked, what's it cost? What could we save by doing it bi-weekly? And I think it was about an $18,000 figure back then.
But that doesn't take into account the opportunity costs and that your people could spend more time working on other
No.
things?
No, that was just the pure cost of spending the extra time to do a payroll every week, and the supplies, and even the time for people to take and pass out paychecks every week at the department levels. I did an analysis of it. And that was confused with the cost of putting the pay stubs in a system, which was only gonna save $900 a year. And so when the previous mayor confused the $18,000 savings and the $900 annual savings, he said, well, let's get this timekeeping system for Munis for $3,300 a year, because the $18,000 will cover that. And that system has failed miserably, still doesn't work, and we've canceled it because we couldn't get it to work at all. It was employee self-services, and the point of it was to put everybody's pay stubs online so that we wouldn't have to print pay stubs for them, and this wouldn't solve people who were getting checks. But then that meant everybody would have to go to a computer somewhere, someday, each day, and pull up their pay stub and print it as they needed it, or file it somewhere. So,
That's pretty common practice, though.
well, it's common practice for a company that has everybody sitting in a computer all day. When you have, let's say, 65% of your people aren't sitting in front of a computer, and then you're gonna tell them, go get your pay stub from the computer, then you're gonna have a problem. Because you're gonna have to line them up at a kiosk somewhere, or ask them to do it at home. And then they're gonna say, wait a minute, you're gonna ask me to do something at home on my own time? I'm gonna charge you for that. So it's problematic when you don't have computers in everybody's hands where they work.
These are all good questions and concerns, but we've gone far afield from our agenda. So let's go back to our agenda, and then at the end of the meeting, perhaps we can ask Mr. Mark some more questions if he's willing.
Mike, quick point of information, where are we on the agenda?
We are on item 3.2.
Okay.
Items 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4 all refer to travel requests by Police Chief Ritter, and I won't read them, but I will ask if anybody has any questions about those, and then we will
Yes,
move
Chief.
those forward.
Chief Ritter, is are the 3 employees that will be going to attend law enforcement active shooter emergency response, are any of those, we approved school resource officers, are any of those school resource officers going to this training?
No.
Okay, thanks.
These are, they specifically train the trainer, so they will go to get the training to be able to train people locally.
Okay.
Out of our public safety vehicle, something I was gonna bring up next week, but the city police chief graciously offered to allow our 2 school resource officers to attend some active shooter training that his department is putting on. So, at no cost to the city, just a good shared resources. So they'll get some active shooter training.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chief.
No problem.
I'd like to make the motion that we move these agenda items forward to tonight's council meeting.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is old business. Any old business? Any new business?
I just had some
Can we-
updated reports that I didn't get a chance to finish. The December report that's preliminary, but the question has always come up about where we was savings on our departments that were consolidated in 2017. And when we take out the cost that's in the CD fund about the DRI seed money that we're planning up of $679,455, we have a $324,000 advantage over the spending, the actual spending from 2017 for all of those departments. And in the benefit side, it's $83,000 favorable. That one probably is gonna break even by the end of this month when we, finish up all of the healthcare costs that have to run out for the month of January. But the $324,000 looks like that's pretty consistent for the rest of the closing of 2018 fiscal year. So that would be the rough number of savings, 18 over 17 for departments that have been consolidated.
Very good.
That's all I got a chance to update. I didn't get a chance to do the graph.
That's fine.
So as soon as we have final numbers on that, I'll get December out.
Okay.
Be within the next week or two.
I know these are probably the busiest weeks of your year on either side of the new year.
Yeah, we're trying to generate the property tax file to get that billed
Yes.
this week. We're just about finished with that.
Oh.
As well as closing out the 2018 expenses, which keep on dribbling in. People have been writing, actually we had to reject about 8 POs today for people writing purchase orders in 2019 for 2018 invoices. They still don't get it, If you don't have it on a PO for the end of 2018, you can't process it as an expense in 19.
Yes.
So about 8 of them had to be rejected today. So you're gonna see some invoices coming before you next week, fairly hefty charges. There are gonna be expenses for 2018 that weren't purchased with advance approval on purchase order from you, and they're over $1,000, of course.
Okay.
Happens every year, and it's another thing that the mayor and I have been talking about for our requisitioning system for over a year.
Okay.
How to get everybody to write POs in advance of buying things, instead of saying, I gotta have an invoice in my hand so I can write an accurate PO.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense, we don't get prior approval for expenditures.
Well, Richard, I just want to say I really appreciate all the effort you put into the budget amendment that will be on the agenda tonight. I know it was a lot of work and at a very, very busy time for you, so.
And we also have to create a contingency account, they agree the fund, but the general fund, because the general fund's the only one with a contingency account at this point.
Yes.
So, if this is adopted tonight, then the figures that you're seeing in that weekly payroll report are gonna change because the overtime budget will be reduced by these numbers.
Yes.
Right.
And then those will be in a contingency fund for later use later in the year.
So the year-to-date variances will actually go up then because the budget will have gone down for overtime?
That's right.
I don't know if you were here,
So
but we discussed the possibility of, at the end of the year, if those funds remain in contingency, to share that money with our managers in some sort of bonus or.
Generally, by the end of the year, any surplus in any account is used to close out the deficits in other accounts. It's like
Could we do that though, if that overtime money has not been used? We can award a small stipend to our.
I would also might say not only just the overtime, if the department is operating under budget.
Well,
In totality.
We'll have to see. But
Yeah. There's something to be said, though, for, even though, I can appreciate the effort that would need to go into those kinds of goals. But at the same time, we would hope that there would be that expectation that that sense of frugality and dedication to the the work at hand would be exercised anyway. So, you know, I kind of have mixed feelings about the idea of an incentive program. I mean, and besides that, I think in some departments it's easier to stay under overtime than others. So you don't want to penalize those departments that, you know, wouldn't necessarily have a demonstrable change in their overtime expenses.
It's difficult, like with a small department like ours, we try to keep the overtime down to a very small number. But if you have a customer come in at 5:04 and they want to ask questions about their multiple accounts, it's going to take you to 4:25. You just lost a half an hour overtime because some
Right.
customer
Right.
might come in at the beginning of the day.
Well, right.
They want to be there at the end of the day. And then, of course, that holds everybody up from cashing out, which could mean everybody's going to be
Yeah.
another half hour to get out of here at 5 o'clock.
Well, and in our discussion, you know, at the end of the budget season too, we heard about, you know, from the police chief and the fire chief, there's some kinds of overtime expenditures are out of control, out of their control. It's done according to policies that already exist.
That's the point about
Yeah.
finding out
Mhm.
what they're doing with
Exactly.
it and why. If it's out of their control, you're absolutely right.
That's right.
So, but if it's something that just happens because it's a rice bowl that can't be broken, you know,
Well, I would be interested in seeing how to move along. I don't know if it would mean requesting that the mayor direct to the department heads to provide answers to the questions that you suggest we need to look into.
Well, you can do it at your committee meetings each week. You know, if this were finance, you could be asking the finance department how they're doing on overtime. Doesn't allow you to get to each department every week, but it gets you all departments at least once a month if you did
True.
it that
Yeah.
way.
But wouldn't
Good
you
idea.
need to request that information in advance so that it could be presented?
I think, well, you pretty quickly establish an understanding that
A
they
protocol.
ought to come with that information, because you will
Right.
be asking them questions.
Okay.
Right, good,
I think, as a matter of fact, you probably made it pretty clear already to the department heads that
okay.
this
So
will be
we're paying attention.
more heavily scrutinized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, can I ask one just real quick
Yeah.
question? And I just wanted to go back, Richard, when you talked about having computer access. Does every single city employee have access to a computer? No?
No.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
no, and the point of that ESS system was to provide a time and attendance feature. And it didn't work. Not just, you know, show the employee their pay stub online, but, you know, it was converted into, oh, we need this also to provide a timekeeping system.
I mean, I'm not saying because Richard, you said every employee sitting down at a computer. I'm not saying but having access that if they needed to look up something on a computer, that they have access to a computer and maybe a printer to print something.
Yeah, not every employee does.
Okay.
And I would say the majority don't,
Okay,
so.
thank you.
It being 5 o'clock, I'd like to make the motion that we adjourn our Finance and Budget Committee meeting.
Seconds.
Second.
Roll call.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Reed,
Yes. Please. We've got a few issues to discuss in executive session tonight. Have a member of the public's asked to come and make a short presentation in our work session now.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know, I can send them, I wanted to send them the best, so we could put them up on the screen. There's the page that gives you the results for
Okay.
everything in the general fund and rec complex.
What a
and that's the
lineup.
benefits. I can send it to everybody.
Would you just send this to us electronically, and that'll be fine. Thank you so much.
Hey, Tim.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gregory Huth. I'm pastor of Lutheran Church of the Redeemer here in Plattsburgh, although I'm not here in that official role. I'm here with some concerned citizens. We call ourselves the Champlain Statue Working Group. By quick by way of quick introduction, I've been here in town for about 5 years, and one of the first things in orienting myself, walking downtown and seeing this Champlain statue, and I was a bit taken aback by it, just by the symbolism of Champlain, the European conqueror, being on the top of our statue, and his ally, the Indian, I assumed it was his guide or something, at the base of the statue, and one is dressed in full battle regalia, and one is kind of naked at the bottom and crouched down. And just kind of wondering what that symbolism was all about. Anyway, I thought it would be helpful to have some kind of interpretive panels or something to explain what was going on in the relationship between Champlain and his Indian assistant at the bottom of the statue. Well, the years kind of went along, and it just was a kind of a nagging issue with me. Then I attended a presentation at SUNY Plattsburgh, and it was about the statue and about the history of the statue, and commentators from the Native American community talking about the statue. And from that, we gathered some names and began our working group to open up a dialogue and conversation and find out about the history of the statue, and perhaps to present some context about what the statue was all about. So this began back in April of 2018, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn my back to you.
That's fine.
So, pardon my back. This is our PowerPoint. Our proposal to you is to add an interpretive panel near the statue of honoring Samuel de Champlain. Next slide, please. Who is the Champlain Statue Working Group? Our group has been meeting approximately bi-weekly since April. Our concerned citizens have included experts in the life of Champlain, in Franco-American history, history and culture of the indigenous peoples of the region. We really tried to do our homework before making our presentation to you. Next slide.
Just hit the space button.
Here are some of the working group members who are before you here today. Next slide. Some of our resources, people we've consulted with, historians, people from the French culture, people from Native American culture here, educators, people from the Champlain History Center in Champlain, New York. So for more than 100 years, Champlain has dominated both the location and the figure of the Native American crouching at his feet. The plaque on the monument declares that Champlain was navigator, discoverer, and colonizer. Next slide. The Native American at the statue. Next slide. The first-time viewer may be surprised to see the European in such a dominant position over his indigenous ally and guide. Today's visitors may also question calling Champlain the discoverer of the area, since there had been people here for thousands of years before him. Champlain founded European settlements in what is now Canada, including Quebec City, but we would not refer to him as a colonizer, as that word, nowadays, carries the negative connotations of the harm caused to those who were colonized. In the 21st century, Champlain is viewed as a navigator, explorer, and cartographer. He made alliances with more than 50 indigenous nations in the early 1600s, drew the first maps of the northeast part of our continent. He could not have explored and made maps, however, without his partnerships with indigenous people. This is a picture drawn by Champlain, incidentally. Champlain and the native peoples both have key roles in our history, much of it little known, some inaccurately described. We would like to install an educational panel giving context to Champlain's monument and correcting the misconceptions. One of the misconceptions, incidentally, is that the native headdress that is presented on the Indian is from a Plains Indian. Our proposed text and images are below. We're not asking the city to fund the panel. Do I hear a cheer rising from the only to provide permission to install it with the labor of city employees. We have contacted the Lake Champlain Basin Program about design services to be consistent with other historic signage in the area. We will find private sources to raise the approximate $1,400. We will need to have the panel and frame manufactured and delivered. This is what we're proposing as the panel narrative. This monument depicts the first known European to see our magnificent lake and valley. Erected in 1912, it shows Chambly de Champlain being guided by an indigenous ally, although the sculptor mistakenly gave him a headdress and moccasins worn by some native peoples in Western Plains. In 1608, Champlain established a settlement at what is now Quebec City. In his explorations and fur trade for France, Champlain depended upon and benefited from his alliances with indigenous nations. With his allies, he traveled the St. Lawrence and Richelieu rivers and this lake to confront their enemy, the Mohawk, farther south. The memorial also recognizes the importance of the birch bark canoe, a well-designed, light, strong craft, so crucial to Champlain's expeditions. The canoe is filled with beaver pelts and corn, both significant local resources. At this monument, Champlain is described as navigator, discoverer, colonizer, but he was a discoverer only from the European point of view. Native peoples had already lived in this valley for more than 11,000 years and knew the area well. Champlain explored the northeast Atlantic coast and inland of the Great Lakes. All of this land became New France under the doctrine of discovery, Pope Alexander VI's 1493 decree, which granted European monarchs permission to claim ownership of the New World. As an expert navigator, explorer, and map maker, and the father of New France, Champlain has had lasting impact. As part of this panel, we were hoping to have these images as well as that background information. Champlain traveled with Indian allies from what is now Quebec City on the St. Lawrence River, the river of the Iroquois, now Richelieu River, and on a beautiful lake he named Champlain, to the southern end of the lake near Ticonderoga. We're hoping this narrative to be captions for the images. Next, please. Champlain made this drawing and included it in his 1613 journal called Voyages. It illustrates the battle he and allied Indian nations had against the Mohawk on July 30th, 1609, near present-day Ticonderoga. Champlain is standing in the center firing his arquebus, that's his gun, with 2 French soldiers shooting from the woods. 3 Mohawks are dying on the ground. Image 3, please. This shows the gustoe, or headdress worn by 3 Iroquois Confederacy Mohawk chiefs who were killed by Champlain. Samuel de Champlain is known as the first scientific cartographer of the northeastern region of North America. His original map of New France was published in 1613 and was relied upon by navigators and French colonists. This image is from a color redrawing published in 1878. An interpretive historical panel displayed in our town, displayed it in the town of Champlain. Our panel would follow this format to complement others posted throughout the Champlain Basin. This is a proposed presentation of the informational panel, what the physical setup would look like. And I believe that is the end of the presentation.
But approximately how large is it? I mean, it was hard to tell through the image.
These particular panels are 42 inches by 24 inches.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? 42?
42 inches by 24 inches.
And about 4.5 feet off the ground. 5 feet,
Yeah,
4.5
something
feet.
probably similar to this. Do you have any other, I'm curious to get your initial reaction, or if you have any other further questions?
I applaud your efforts.
Yes.
I think it's
Really
wonderful.
That's a
appreciate
wonderful
them.
idea. Thank you for all your efforts.
Yes,
Well, thank you for your attention.
thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to enter executive session. 3 items, pending Article 7 litigation with Georgia Pacific, proposed acquisition of a particular piece of real property, the public discussion of which will substantially affect the value thereof, and potential litigation with the town regarding annexation. So moved by Councilor Ansel, second by Councilor McFarland. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh my gosh.
I guess we're going to be visiting you on Monday.
Why do I feel like
Yes, I wrote it down.
So that was the cost of this.
That was up to November. December.
So was that quick final? Okay.
If you
Yeah.
How often are they dealing with the public face to face? So you get people from the public in there every night? Yeah, that's right. But I wouldn't think anybody would complain if they saw your guys. No, the most well, I'll tell you. They have to wear shorts, Crocs, because he did. I did. If I could wear shorts, he wears shorts. That's freaking. It's just let them go. That's amazing. Well, yeah.
Restroom? This was in the restroom.
You're touching it?
What?
It wasn't the sink. Where was it before the sink? There you go. So. Yeah. Well, Mike told me that there's some fire somewhere, maybe on the cattle or the market or something like that. Casualty that morning. So casualty had to go back and take me out there. So they pulled in. Shorts. I was the same way.
Yeah, I was, when I mentioned it, I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is like overtime.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, that's nice.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think it's Council Moore.
Did you look at it?
Yeah, but it's all like.
Dear diary.
I've
already found something.
It's all like just weird numbers.
His numbers? Ones and zeros?
Ryan, this isn't yours, is it, Ryan?
No.
No, okay. They sort of look like computers still in there. I didn't look in it, if anybody asks.
The seal's
What
been
if it's
broken.
secret code?
Yeah.
It's a test.
Maybe it was Matt.
No, Matt. Yeah, he's feeling longer. So, a lot of
Right.
yeah, so, you know,
In
naturally.
my office, I just got over cold. Joe and I just did that.
I've had it for 2 weeks.
I still have it.
And then Eva was a little, she felt sick today, so it's probably just cycling through.
You need to
The process-
disinfect that.
Yeah, that's what I tried to go to the county, and they weren't there. At this point now, at this point, I'm not gonna get like.
They said this is still, right? They said that.
I get it at the end of the year.
No, you still should be getting it. This lady came in, she had flu. Still, or no, she had flu shot. They got flu.
Yeah, exactly, so it's like.
That's no reason.
It's really, it's not that I don't want it, it's just I'm too lazy. Yeah, that's.
Okay, there's.
Next time I guess next time I go, I have health insurance, so. I pay my bills, so. Yeah.
I don't think I just hope someone comes in. I'll call it.
Yes. Just a right one.
You have to, I want to see what you say. Sure. She's trying to flirt. He's a good dude. I'm hanging his 3 hours. He's going out there. He gets time and a half for the time he worked. The way straight time to the rest. It looks just like he was. So all 3 hours are time and a half. Even 3 hours. Okay, well, 3 hours there. What is here? Did you really see today? He's got curly hair like literally what it looks super. You gotta be looking for that call. What is it? Here's what's good. It's gonna take you 20 hours to pick it up, then you got 3 hours. Right? You gotta do is you gotta go to the yard and get a truck. Yeah, well, I don't know. So there's something there to do that. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I knew it was just, I wanted to pick it up with my own. That's yeah. Every time I talk to him, he looks at me, and I see him look at one thing. So if they get called in for something like that, they don't have to go. They don't have to go into wait 3 hours. They go home and whatever they got. Yeah, they get alcohol. What are they gonna do? They just drink a lunch. Yeah, I don't know. You better really should. Yeah, I want my isn't that sweet? It's nice what you said earlier today.
You're gonna put that, that's like a Hallmark card. You should
I just hope it's going to slow in as well.
Yeah,
Thanks. Oh my God.
If we set up like 4 hours, 6.
Who's all on the committee? Is it rounded out now?
We have one more person that would be, someone advocate person. Class. So I know,
CCI.
Rochelle has someone, and some reached out to Max, there's 2 candidates, they're trying to get in contact with Max.
Actually, John Farley is CCI. So who's at the committee? It's Joe Hotel. No, said she was
Dave.
Dave.
Oh, you did?
The 11th. 12.
So you might have just, this guy. And it's hard, and it's open street.
I watched a little bit of it the other night, but I kinda got like sleepy. That looked just like this. I did not do that.
Maybe what you got on my son's hair.
It's blinking. I'll have to call an LD tomorrow.
Mary Buckle.
And Rodney Brown.
Oh, yeah, Rodney's. Actually, Rodney.
Yeah. What are they? We don't say what it is.
It's okay, you can tell us. It's okay.
Who said it? Can you read my writing?
Litigation, always litigations on property. Well, so the council accepted the parking study from February 2018. And then they developed it, so we're looking at implementing certain policies of that, including replacing the parking, or assuming the that's the one that the parking study happens, replacements, enforcement, so whether it's setting up some system for generating revenue, whether it's permits, some form of revenue generating, so it's not coming out of the general fund, so it needs to be self-sufficient. So I think there's just a couple different ways we can accomplish that. But you just slip on that one part.
Save yourself some trouble. Because as fast as you put it in, you're gonna have to take it back out.
We've done that.
Been there, done it.
Well, that was
Just think about it. It doesn't matter, just think about driver's ed, you took driver's ed, right? What did they, what can you get a ticket?
I don't think it's driver's ed.
Well, maybe you should.
I just got the junior license from
You
you.
don't back out.
Yes.
You can get a ticket.
So, I think what would happen with my let's say I go on future Jersey Street, most likely traffic comes significantly, so it's more or less a glorified parking road. So it's not something sliding down to 35, trying to get to the corner bridge. Once again, that doesn't change what you said, but that would be the next step to make it a little more.
That's okay. You can wish on the wall. It's a normal cost. Put it that way, is that push down parking like that, where you have to back into traffic? Force them back into traffic? Or you're just going up back into traffic?
And he's like, I know.
So you got like a bike lane that you expect. Ethan's proposing three.
I don't think it is, because that means,
It would be the costume.
it's probably, yeah, I know.
It's definitely
It probably is, because like, I didn't
Now, are any steps taken prior to development?
Yes, again.
So is your plan.
Really? So then what steps are taken and then the development?
It's like we have, like, the department was taxed.
So market,
We don't have.
so that's worst case scenario.
It's like that.
Want a tour?
No, stick them in the seat. Wanna go for a ride Saturday night? I think ever up to they go for that all-day ride. You only go like 200 miles an hour. Yeah, you have to have a CDL to be in the wings.
You're way.
Who are you gonna put?
And then you're gonna be scared to death.
Play the park car style.
Yeah.
Legit.
Why did they get started on that?
When you make a hard top.
5 p.m.? Oh, okay. Wait, how long?
It's, yeah.
It's not easy problem to solve.
Still like what?
There's been harder problems to solve, but.
No, what?
Yeah, like feasibility.
Yeah.
Full fusion.
Government shut down.
Oh, I know.
But no,
That's your.
but like, I probably.
I was waiting right now.
Here's the way. Development never happened, there still will be paid parking down there?
Yeah, the guy,
The overview.
you could make the argument, you would need, there would still, be slow design to moderate, and regulate how. On-street parking.
Okay.
That was still. In my mind.
Oh.
Let's see. We can start taking this if they've signed it, right?
You have two of these, so did they sign both of them?
Let's see.
Is the question.
Look at this. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Yeah, that's Chris Sadiq. They sent him through to be paid. I'm sorry. And he wasn't supposed to be. So we caught it. Hey, these are all done. Okay.
He's got all those? Yeah. Oh, the other, yeah.
To make work to do whatever you want. I bet we go for 6 months. I don't make much progress on the IT committee.
We have to visually, one thing, everything do it, I verify.
John's gonna get back out again about when the money's gonna.
Why, are you ready back?
No, I mean, this is about the 4th time we've eaten that guy. It's about a year and a half.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. You said you didn't get touched on something, so I don't know. Just to find out if we okay with the number. Who the contact
So then I can know what number. We go back to driving right on there. Numbers are good.
And she's just deadlines today for some reason.
Years back, I got back, and then it was.
Maybe it works for Tim Ryan, meeting as well.
Oh, wait.
I think he works in the same house. That one time, you never know how March. He doesn't have approval to pay anything. I'd be surprised if we get it sooner than that.
And they'll believe me because I'm the one that you're.
No.
I did, but it's just about that.
It's bad stuff that we get to go play. What's that? You look at things like that, and it's like, that was so cool. The guys have to cheat into the other lane.
There were parking meters on the streets. They're watching the guys drive drunk down Brinkerhoff. 2 in the morning. He's weaving back and forth.
That's when drinking and driving was legal.
Goes off the road, knocks down the parking meter, goes right over it. He winds up in somebody's front yard, on the outside of Brinkerhoff. His car was tipping on a wall that, was securing the door. Throwing him back in his pickup truck, right? Yeah.
Well, like, last year, there goes, I said, anything happened? He goes, well, he goes, at college, and he was walking through town, he got these breakaway sign pole, stop sign, he was dragging it down the drive. Scott pulls up and say, hey, listen, go in the back and call you. We'll say, he kept walking, one day we got a phone call. The guy was like,
You wanted the sign?
he wanted that stop sign, and they had both in the breakaway, he's like, I'll do this, just throw it back.
Did he end up having a call?
No, God, they were ignoring him, and he started walking away from us, like, hey. Fire hydrants, I love them, people run over them, and act like, but when they get hung up on them, that's the question mark. They can't always.
This guy doesn't know what the parking meter is.
Yeah,
I think that, if he starts with concrete walls, he's just gonna get away with getting his car out of there, so he wouldn't get caught. If he jumps on a grant, well, whichever it comes, he's better, much better off. I think that's where
And then the insurance company called it, it's a payroll person, the last one.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, they're already Chrissy, he's like, it is what it is. And I was in the office, and all the farmers, and Chrissy shut him right down, and then they paid us, we got to check on it. We're funny how these things. Well, I love her, we're bigger than this thing. I love it.
She treats him like a dog. We put that into DPW services. We can press it around once or twice. You get enough of that, will increase your budget. It'll compensate for your overtime costs.
I've used some of those numbers. I actually forgot something. If it goes to Sunday, you ever had a shift? Now we're on double. You guys call me.
No, but they have some.
My office. I thought you could call down holiday. It's double time. But then you also if you're on overtime. Take 3 hours shift. Yeah, that's 8 hours shift. So that's my one time. Yeah, but if you're called day on holidays, so it's double time. But then if you are going to work over 40 hours, then it's time and a half. That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. You give them 10 for pump it up. Well, the base wage is $24 an hour. $400.
That's where my.
Okay. So get your time and be charged. We already took $48 and put it in the contingency. That's the problem. In case they have somebody else do something for them on overtime. I probably think it's there. I don't know. If it wouldn't be you, but she's still. Yeah, but I mean, but you see, no. Zoning has some OT in it. No. Okay. I can dump it, but that's job.
Well, actually, David,
Yeah. You're taking a lot of time instead of doing overtime. I was on question. I know, and then getting the work done too. A lot of people want when I first started working, you get so much content. There was so many workers, so much just getting done. So everybody had to overtime. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy that. I had one lady who was offering I told her, I said, if we can do without you for 18 weeks, we can do without you. 18 weeks off? That's not. To make it oh yeah.
I said something. Well, Steve wanted us to get this. Steve wanted us to get him out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I know. Especially those ones that you can't read anything. You see the black strip of like a couple, and then the rest of the song, you see anything. Once again, it's like, it looks great. Yeah, I'm sure when the first time I read it 2 weeks ago, we were around the way.
Oh, I was really about it.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to.
Or sign it.
You're gonna have to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's so, for historical monument preservation. I've barely a lot of time when it comes to that.
You know what nobody ever put anything on the page for one of those.
You should suggest that. Council. Zero parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome to the party,
Well, I feel like there's people when Daddy's used to
You know,
work,
there's a lot of traffic.
He took about an hour and a half.
That's a lot of hours. 5 feet. Like the next day, the guy who walks all around, I was hoping to work with a job in Francis. He walked with no shoes for a long time.
In terms of work for all of
He was in America. Banged his head on Joel comes down, I'm talking to him, I said, why don't you go think about putting out 8 anyway, just something, so I mean, you can see it when you're looking down. They start digging into the pieces, that'll be good. I'll make sure you write down the time, then you can solve the problem. Tell us what you're spending. Why do you spend this? Okay, understand.
That's why I was putting my furniture on myself. My sharks might move. That's why I moved my furniture. My furniture.
I don't think you want to
You're right.
10% of
Kyle takes some stuff pretty slow.
That's why. I still,
So like, where did you have first? You know, so it's
Which council told them?
two average. Then that's 10%. Both of the first quarter and the second quarter, and then just stay, push by
So it's not a plastic cover. Can of spray paint.
But he won't stick to it. Yes, right, so the judge explained to us. So you got a bill for the other 14,000. I can't have that guy. And then he calls me. If you got it in the store, so he's probably I live on Saturday, and my basement has water. I got like 500. I can't get it. It's like, it just, it seems that level. It stays there. I got a couple of those. I sweep in the snow. Oh, it's the same game. Yeah.
thought he asked how much was off week payroll. That's a big concern of ours. I know that. We allow that for everybody, she checks it. All the spouses.
Sometimes they come in at the same week and sometimes they don't. I'm not sure which one's they come out of the same. Mike and Joe for the old song. They do. It's like yeah, no one knows about that. Nobody can get their digs into that. Yeah, my wife likes it. That's convenient. I don't know what it's like.
Oh, we don't. So like,
Take mine and put her on to income tax. So that I don't have to worry about making a payment before January 1st. I don't know what the new tax
I know that's what I'm saying, but I think based on the numbers, they might do that. Yeah, exactly. I think that what's the minimum production?
No, but I'm saying, is it like that, it's hard. I also was doing something last Friday.
Yeah, that's why it's on.
You see Jenny? You go, Jenny. It costs the same by triple tax, former controller to it. We have dogs too. My old Vegas for like half the year. He made it by his left hand. I don't know, he was playing games, he played cards yesterday. Oh yeah, no, he was a real yeah. He was real cool. He was out of the stuff where he was all just like Sam. Yeah, because he go out there, because I think I wrote March, he was talking to him. That's got 6 months a year, he stays in business.
I apologize for the relatively lengthy executive session. We were discussing a matter of real property of which public discussion would affect the value. issues relating to potential litigation on, or annexation, and tax case, potential tax challenge on behalf of Georgia Pacific. And no decision was made in executive session. Let's begin our meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here?
Counselor Kelly?
Here?
Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Counselor Ensel?
Here.
Counselor McFarland?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
I think he's just stepped out. Be back in a moment. I've got, in interest of brevity, no comments for tonight.
Okay.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on January 10th, 2019 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, seconded by Councilor Ensel, I'm sorry. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending January 16th, 2019 in the amount of $468,730.65 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, seconded by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have in your packets the regular routine reports for the week. Let's go to individual committee reports, beginning with governance strategy and city operations. Councilor Armstrong.
No updates.
City infrastructure, Councilor Moore.
No updates at this time.
Finance and budget, Councilor Kelly.
We held our meeting today and moved resolutions forward for tonight's council meeting.
Public safety, Councilor Gibbs.
I don't have any updates, but I did request to take tour of the various departments, and I had one yesterday with Joe. And we have fire on Monday, and Wednesday is police. So I'm very excited.
Thank you. Plattsburgh Public Library, Councilor Ensel.
No report.
And MLD, Board President, Councilor McFarland.
No updates at this time.
Resolved, the reports as listed are hereby ordered received, and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor McFarland, second by Councilor Gibbs. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondence or recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills honored by the Common Council for the week ending January 18th, 2019 in the amount of $1,629,069.34 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. It's an opportunity for any members of the public to please come address the council. This first public comment period is for issues on the agenda tonight. You can get an agenda just outside, and there will be another comment period at the end of the meeting for general issues of mutual concern. Seeing none, let's continue, please.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the city chamberlain to transfer 11.96% of
Make a
all-
motion to waive the reading and move the resolution forward.
Moved by Councilor Ansel, second by Councilor Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Discussion on the item itself?
The only thing that concerns me here is that any department that's been diligent, has been keeping, faithful to their budget, their overtime budget, is now gonna have their overtime budget slashed 12%. That does make me a little uncomfortable.
I wouldn't say that it's slashed. They still have access to the money, but that's being held in a contingency. If they need it, if they come to a point of their overtime, the money is there for them. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's slashed.
Temporarily reduced.
That's fair, the point still stands that,
Yes, I agree.
it affects certain departments
That's
differently.
right.
Sure.
I would guess those departments are gonna continue to do an excellent job with their overtime management regardless of whether we take this measure or not. But it does, or provides a mechanism where the council can watch overtime closely, and if we're not able to achieve these savings of $144,833, then, you know, we will know the reason why. So I think it's a great tool, the budget amendment, to help us do that and to remind us constantly that it is a source of large expense in the city and something that we should be keeping an eye on.
Further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
No.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves 2 Police Department employees to attend the 2019 Fire Investigation Academy from February 21st through March 1st, 2019, and March 4th through March 8th, 2019, at the Academy of Fire Science in Montour Falls, New York. The total cost will not exceed $1,980 and will be expensed out of the Asset Forfeiture Fund.
Moved by Councilor Ensel, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion?
Seems to be a good investigation or good training.
Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with
Beth, I'll make a motion to combine items 8B, C, well, 8B and C, and move both forward to
Waive the reading to move.
waive the reading and move both forward to vote.
Just B and C.
B and C.
Just B and C.
Moved by Councilor McFarland, second by Councilor Ensel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on the items themselves? You previously discussed it during your work session, committee meeting earlier tonight.
Right.
Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Are there any discussion or any items for initial consideration tonight?
Yes, I have a resolution for initial consideration. Whereas pursuant to the authority and provisions of Section 10 of the Municipal Home Rule Law of the State of New York and the statutory powers vested in the Common Council of the City of Plattsburgh, the Common Council, to regulate and control land use and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its residents, pursuant to Local Law P-3 of 2018, which was adopted on March 15, 2018, the Common Council declared an 18-month moratorium on all applications or proceedings for applications for the issuance of approvals or permits for the commercial cryptocurrency mining operations in the city of Plattsburgh. Whereas pursuant to Local Law P-3 of 2018, the aforementioned moratorium may be terminated earlier than 18 months if the Common Council determines by resolution that the purpose of the local law have been fulfilled. Whereas the city formed a cryptocurrency zoning committee to study the matter, and whereas on March 19, 2018, the New York State Public Service Commission adopted an order approving tariff amendments with modifications, commonly referred to as Rider A, impacting high-density load customers to mitigate/minimize any utility surcharges experienced by residential customers as a result of incremental purchase power costs. And whereas on October 25th, 2018, the Common Council adopted Local Law P-6 of 2018, which established zoning regulations, fire suppression requirements, heat controls, noise limits, and nuisance abatements provisions for commercial cryptocurrency mining operations in the city. Now therefore, it is hereby resolved that the Common Council determines that the purpose of the commercial cryptocurrency mining operation moratorium established by Local Law P-3 of 2018 have been fulfilled, and the moratorium is hereby terminated, effective the date this resolution is approved by the Council.
Has. Purpose has.
Just a minor edit on the initial consideration. You're not asking for a vote tonight. This is to inform your colleagues.
Oh, that's correct. I am putting it forth for initial consideration. I'm not asking for Rule 4 to be enacted. With the new rule changes, I don't think that I could get it through. It's not an emergency. I also want to just make sure that I read it tonight and that the public would be forewarned about it and they can come in next week with any objections or any concerns regarding it.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Any other items for initial consideration tonight? New business and additional council reports.
I have a few items of new business. Most of them are going to refer to the Parking Advisory Committee. The Parking Advisory Committee did have its first meeting on Tuesday. I know some of the councilors were there. I know the mayor was there as well. It was interesting, to say the least. Where they did pass some rules, and they will be meeting every month. The next one has the next date has not been set yet. The Parking Advisory Committee did want to make a recommendation to the Common Council for one item. It was brought up during the Parking Advisory meeting that the state requires or has a list of municipalities that have the authority to grant residential parking permits to its residents, and that Plattsburgh is not currently does not currently have that authority. The Parking Advisory Committee would ask the city to pursue gaining that authority, and so that they have that tool to possibly pursue in creating an efficient managed parking system. So I would ask that the Common Council
Do we know what the
pursue
process is?
Right now, I don't think we do know what the process is, but I wanted to bring that up at tonight's council meeting so that can be moving along. Another night.
So would you like to direct me to work with legal counsel to see if we can potentially secure that provision for our city as well?
I would like that, yes. Thank you. Another form of new business is parking. As many of you know, I'm a local attorney, so I spend a lot of time over at the county courthouse. The county courthouse was in a bit of an uproar today regarding parking. A lot of staff, attorneys have gotten parking tickets. And I do know that a lot of, I imagine that a lot of members of the public are going to continue to get parking tickets over there. As many of you know, parking is about 2 hours on Court Street right there and surrounding the government building. A lot of times you go in for court today, a lot of times you go in for court, and court may last less than an hour, but you may be there for well over 2 hours just waiting for your court case to come. In fact, today I was there for over 2 hours and my court case never got called. So that is something that that was not talked about at the Parking Advisory Committee. This is me going a little around the Parking Advisory Committee. Of more concern, I had a conversation with the Commissioner of Jurors today, and about 50 jurors have gotten parking tickets. So far on Tuesday, they are scheduled for 2 jury trials in front of Judge Favreau and Judge Bruno, where they plan on having 160 members of the jury pools there. I know she's very concerned about jurors getting parking tickets. When a juror, you get called to a jury, you have no choice but to go to court, and most of the times you are going to be there for more than 2 hours. I think you get paid $40 a day or something like that if you're on a jury. It's really only a problem for one day. Once they pick the jury, there's typically only 12 people on the jury, maybe with an alternate or two. Grand juries are a little different, but she wanted me to convey to the Common Council her angst at the parking situation in relation to jurors.
I know that when I've
Well,
served
perhaps
as
the
a
county needs to
juror,
provide
that
more
I.
parking.
That would be an option.
You get a ticket so that you can park in the lot without being evicted, so I'm wondering, if you display that, there's the big county lot, there's that lot, and all of these people can't be accommodated by their lots, is that what she's saying?
I actually went downstairs and spoke to Rodney Brown today as well. I believe when talking to Director Miller before, the county employs a little over 400 people. They have about parking for about a little over 200 spaces. Since parking has been enforced, the county employees have been parking in the parking lot. And I can personally testify that those county parking lots are now pretty much completely full.
Mhm.
And I think even, and that was the source of concern amongst the county employees as well, that they weren't finding parking spots in their parking lot and were forced to park on the street and thus getting tickets. The jurors, they do get a ticket that they can put on their dashboard, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah.
And it does allow them to park in the county parking lot, however, if there's no
That's
spots.
right, that's right.
There aren't, so, I don't know, Chief, if a juror has a ticket, it doesn't give them permission to park on the street, is that correct?
This is something that I've been discussing for the entire week. It's been a source of discussion, so rather than open it up right here, I'm gonna continue to talk to the commissioner of jurors.
Thank you, Chief.
I think
So
you
I-
highlight a very clear fact that there's inadequate parking, and that committee
Mhm.
has a lot of work to do, and the council may need to have to even intervene and make decisions even before the committee has full time to do all of their deliberations, because they only meet once a month and can probably only resolve about one issue each month. So I imagine it's gonna require some of our involvement as well in helping out, reaching some short-term and long-term solutions here.
And that's, I guess, my main point. The next parking advisory committee, like I said, has not been set yet, but it is set to meet every month. I don't think this issue could wait a month. I'm happy to, in the week, talk to the mayor, and if the mayor is in favor, bring the police chief into these discussions, and maybe the common council will have to address this issue and maybe other issues before the next meeting of the parking advisory committee.
I think that may be necessary for this issue because it's a problem. And as you recall from the parking committee meeting last week, or earlier this week, there were 90% of the audience were employees or businesses downtown that felt equally strongly that they would like to have some sort of a parking permit. So I think that we've discovered is a really important issue. I'm not sure how we managed to skirt that issue up to 2015 when we really stopped doing our parking enforcement. Maybe there's some history we can learn about how it's been done in the past, but clearly it's a big challenge right now. So we'll take you up on that and have some meetings and try to put together some sort of a plan to propose.
And I have one more item of new business. And it also involves the Parking Advisory Committee. I did get an email yesterday from a member of the Strong Towns Plattsburgh. And she was expressing consternation regarding the council appointing a city employee as the member of the Parking Advisory Committee that was the downtown resident. The person in question is a downtown resident. He does work for the city. And I told her I would bring that concern to the council. She expressed that she thought it registered a conflict of interest and wanted perhaps 2 resolutions, maybe to add another person to the advisory committee that was a downtown resident, or perhaps to make the downtown resident that is the city employee a non-voting member and add another downtown resident. So I guess either way, it would be adding another downtown resident. For my own personal stake, and I told her this, I didn't think it constituted a conflict of interest. I think the downtown resident is a downtown resident. He offers that perspective that the committee is looking for a downtown resident. But I did tell her I would bring it to the council, so if any of you have concerns regarding that or thoughts regarding that, now you know about it. I can also tell you that I did mention it. I forwarded her concerns along to the other members of the city's ethics board. So far, one of them hasn't been able to respond. I know he's away. The other one did respond and said he didn't see a conflict of interest. I also went and spoke with the member of the county on the Parking Advisory Committee today, and he said he didn't see a conflict of interest for whatever that's worth.
Thank you. Any other council reports or new business? Seeing none, this is another opportunity for the public to please come and address the council on any issues of mutual concern. Please be mindful of the time limit, and just state your name and your address quick.
Usually I don't prepare anything, but sometimes I don't stay focused enough, so. Good evening, my name is Carol Pepper. I live at 17 Couch. I'm a resident of Plattsburgh for over 60 years, and I, as many people, have been witness and privy to many downtown redevelopment plans and parking problems and snow removal and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've lived in Montreal for 7 years. I go to Lake Placid a lot. And there's many cities that have similar problems as what we're now facing. One of the concerns that was brought up at the parking meeting was that we're dealing with this now. We knew this was going to be an issue, and unfortunately here we are faced, but we should have probably worked on this a lot sooner. We would have had more time and more forethought. So with what Mr. Mark McFarland had said, I encourage the planning committee, well, the parking committee and the common council to talk to other areas like Lake Placid. I spoke to some members. I don't know, was that when Carl did the plan? Was the mayor of Lake Placid and people in Lake Placid have struggled with insufficient parking and problems with their plans and discussions? Were they brought into that at all?
I can't say for sure because I wasn't a member of the council or involved in that, but I can tell you, and having looked over the parking advisory documents, that there was parallels drawn between Lake Placid. So I think there was, I don't know the extensiveness of that, but I think there was, Mr. Forrester did look into Lake Placid and Burlington and Glens Falls and other areas around there who have parking systems.
From what I understand, it might be helpful to actually talk to the mayor. The mayor has been, I think, 30 years. I think he's been the mayor of Lake Placid. And I think anybody that frequents Lake Placid has seen changes in their parking plans. There's been changes as it's grown, and the downtown has been developed for tenant use and more commercial and tourists. And yes, we're not exactly like that, but they have similar problems that we're being faced with. Living in Montreal, we're talking about parking permits. And living in Montreal, there's such a terrible problem with snow removal, and I think our city is doing a terrific job, by the way. I think that once we've set that in place, it works like a dream. I have a lot of tenants. I tell them you need to be off the street. The ones that don't get towed, and then they can clear the lots. I've been in a lot of other cities that have piles of snow and they can't even navigate through the streets. But in Montreal, you as a resident or a tenant can go to the it's not the government center, it's another name, but pay for a parking pass for the year. And I encourage the council to think about, obviously it's going to have to be multifaceted, but one way to solve some of the problem is not have passes for tenants, even though, you know, I have property near downtown, for tenants in the downtown corridor. I think that, you know, especially a lot of them are college students or people that, I'm not talking about people that are handicapped or that can't walk. That's a different story. You're going to tackle that a different way. But the ones that can walk can definitely go from Court Street or Oak Street or other areas that they can actually have parking permits. You're going to have to work with the police on how you're going to deal with snow removal. In Montreal, they do alternate streets. We have flashing, but because now we're not going to have a parking lot, maybe we do use the one at Harbor or the Plattsburgh Marina, but we do need to look at that. I'm hoping we develop that for a hotel at some point, and we'll have to look at that down the road. And getting off the parking a little, well, I'll stay with the parking for a minute. So it was brought up, you were there, it was brought up at the parking meeting. We're giving tax dollars and incentives for hopefully Prime will come and develop. I think that that would be a real injection into the downtown corridor. Any revitalization only happens with people living in the downtown corridor. You have people, you have money, things change. But I think that their plan saying that 1.5 parking spots per unit of 127, even though it will meet zoning requirements, it's insufficient. I have rental properties. I will tell you that even my couples, they live in a one-bedroom, they each have a car. So for us to hope that people are going to walk and bike is, is a disservice because the problem is that all the shopping is uptown, and most people, we don't have public transport, so most people are gonna have to have a car. And I really think that we need to have them give the 35 spaces in the second building. We're gonna give them incentives, and I think I've spoken to them, they seemed encouraged. The outdoor pool is not something that is really gonna be an attraction, I think, as they thought. I'll just end really quick. The historic downtown, I've spoken to Matt Miller briefly, and I spoke at the DRI meeting. The area that they're going to put for an amphitheater, I think that we need to look at that for a glass or atrium off of Bagel Pit. I think that having sidewalk, having eating along the street is not as advantageous and encouraging if we could do something where they could rent out space in something that's year-round. And then the West Telecom, where the metal is falling off the building, if we can work with West Telecom on removing that whole apparatus and the wooden structure and having mosaics on that side instead, like the library and other places, instead of having metal, maybe showing historic downtown with the Witherell and the trolley and Trinity Park when it had a monument, I think that would be a real attraction for the downtown. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council? Seeing none, I thank you for your patience tonight on our relatively long executive session. And do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, roll call. Roll call. Hold
Counselor
on.
Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
We finished that with reasonable time.
Does anybody still need to look at this report of the new scene?
What can I do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everything.
Hi. Yes, me too. We met
Well,
yesterday.
so we do have noise
And
ordinances that
I was coming, so.
but I know Councilor Ensel.
Okay, good. Yeah,
We
so.
looked into noise ordinances and possibly updating it, and we're talking with corporate council as well.